Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio. This is Stephen, your host, British by birth, American by choice. The Founding Fathers crafted some remarkable documents that led to the creation of a great country founded on liberty and self-reliance. I have lived in the Euro-socialist nightmare, and I'm doing what I can to return this country to the vision that the Founding Fathers gave us. We need to strive to rebuild that shining city on the hill, for without us, the world has nowhere to turn for freedom. For the next hour, I will be presenting news, views, and guests that help keep the true spirit of America alive. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're listening. This is Stephen, your patriot come lately, British by birth, but American by choice, and glad to be back in the USA. Yes, that's right, I'm back in the USA after my wanderings across the Atlantic for the last two shows. I'm glad to say I'm back here, broadcasting tonight from the beautiful city of Houston in the great state of Texas. We got a special show tonight. One of my regular listeners, very proud to call him a friend and a regular listener, John Hancock, will be joining us in a minute or two, and I see he's already in the waiting room there, waiting to come in. But before I introduce him, just one thing. It looks tonight, I saw some things on Fox News, that many of the Democrats are rebelling against Obamacare, and there may be cracks appearing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few days. Who knows? We might be rid of it after all. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see that. But we're not going to talk about that tonight, because tonight I want to talk about American Conservatism and setting the record straight, which is the essay that John Hancock wrote. Now, regular listeners will know John Hancock wrote a great book, which I've talked about a number of times, Liberty Inherited. And he also wrote this short essay, and it sort of explains why there are different kinds of conservatives. But I don't want to give too much away, so I will bring John in. I see he's there on the line. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Stephen.
Nice to speak to you again, John. It's been a while that we've actually spoken by voice.
Yes, it's been quite a while.
Yeah, but, just to let the listeners know, John does appear in the chat room quite regularly, so we do exchange chats on the show, etc. And as I said, tonight we're going to talk about American conservatism and how it does not necessarily, or does not absolutely lead to fascism, in spite of what people say. And we'll talk, that's the main topic for this evening. And just to let folks know, we also have, John will be coming back in I think it's about a month's time, isn't it, John, to celebrate William of Orange taking power. And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. But that's in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, right?
Yeah, I believe so. It was December 19th was when he accepted the Declaration of Rights, and which is the settlement that allowed him to assume the throne of England as William III.
Anyway, so that's another show, and that's going to go a bit back to the book Liberty Inherited. But I picked up your essay, John. Actually, before we start on the essay, let me, first of all, I owe you an apology. And you're probably thinking, what's that for?
Yeah.
Last week you were in the chat room, and you put a comment in there about that being the day that William of Orange actually landed in the UK when he started his, can't really call it an invasion, well, sort of, but he was invited in, so it's, yeah, anyway, but that's when he landed, right? And you put some comment there.
Yes, he landed on, it was actually Guy Fawkes Day, so it was November 5th. And so, yes, and that is so a week ago, that was the 325th anniversary of the start of the Glorious Revolution.
Yeah. But you mentioned the word that I need to apologize for. You said it was Guy Fawkes Day, or Guy Fawkes Night, really. We used to call it in the UK, which used to be actually quite a big night. I can remember as a child when I only lived there a couple of years at that age, and then a couple of years or 3 years while I was at college. But in those days, I can still remember, Guy Fawkes Night was quite big. So you sort of put that comment in there, and I'm afraid it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and also with the other things going on that week, it went right over the top of my head. So my apologies for that, because really, in a way, we should have talked about Guy Fawkes last week, because in a way he's been sort of co-opted by the Occupy movement. But in some ways, he was actually very reactionary, because he wanted to bring back the establishment, in actual fact, the Catholic establishment. That was his goal. And, nowadays they try and portray him as really being someone who was fighting the establishment. But that was not what he was at all.
Right. He was a terrorist at the time, basically. And he, the movie V for Vendetta glorified him. There's that saying, remember the 5th of November, that they repeat throughout that movie.
Right.
And, of course, the mask and everything. Even when I was there the first time in England, which was in 89, it was still a fairly big thing. They had bonfire nights and the big party. Strangely enough, I found myself invited to a house that had they made their own beer, and they told me to go upstairs to where they were brewing their beer and get myself one. Well, I was pouring myself one, and it was kind of like the guy's library. And I look around at his books, and there was a bunch of books on Trotsky and Lenin. So I was kind of like celebrating Guy Fawkes Night out down in Portsmouth with a bunch of socialists and communists.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting evening.
Yeah, and well, just very quickly on Guy Fawkes, I do want to say that I was surprised this time round, in actual fact, how low-key it actually was. Yes, there were fireworks going off, but they were going off, 2-3 nights before, and even 2-3 nights afterwards. While before we left, in the past it just used to be that one night all the fireworks would go off. As you said, you'd have the bonfires, you'd burn the guy, and the guy was basically a doll that would be made like a scarecrow of straw, and you'd stuff it into clothes, and they would wheel him around the town, collect money so that the kids could buy fireworks. Penny for the guy was the cry, and you'd give them a small amount, and they'd collect that all and go off and buy some fireworks. Very little of that, and instead, what struck me very much was in that period, a few days earlier, this was Halloween, and that was a much bigger, seemed to be a much bigger holiday, unfortunately. So it's sort of part of this globalization, I guess, that's going on, that we lost a little bit of that Guy Fawkes celebration. And
it's also part of the political correctness, and a lot of lack of education that's being done in the schools. Because Guy Fawkes was a Catholic, and he was there to blow up Parliament. And people don't understand, and I mentioned this in Liberty Inherited, and you might remember, is that the Catholicism of the 1600s was not the same Catholicism that it is today.
Oh, no, it was...
it was very tyrannical. You had to give oath to the Pope above the king or local government. It was very similar to extreme Islam today.
Right.
Where the papal law was more was followed more than the local law or civil law. So if you can imagine what extreme Islam is today, that was how Catholicism was in the 1600s, 1500s.
Yep. And that actually is perhaps now a good segue into your essay. And so let me just give a quick my kind of summary of the essay, and then I'd like you, John, to sort of expound on that, or tell me where I'm wrong, or give a bit more detail. But basically, I read it and I was very taken on how clearly you sort of explain a lot of things that we see today, as you say in the description of the essay, the civil war in the GOP, where it's coming from. And basically the essay talks about conservatism, but really that there are two kinds of conservatism. One is conserving the power of the establishment, and so that to me ties into what we were just talking about, Guy Fawkes, Catholicism, basically conserving the power at the center, and the other kind of conservatism, which is conserving liberty. And in your book, you talk about Maistre and Burke. So, am I right there? Did I read the essay correctly?
Yes, you did. And just to let you know, if they go to johnhancock.com, they can sign up and get a free PDF copy of the essay. It'll be sent to them. They just go and put their email in, and it's automated, and it should be sent to them almost immediately if anybody's interested in getting a free copy. But we need to understand is, as I explain in the essay, is that these terms that we use, left, right, conservative, liberal, did not exist before the French Revolution. They all came out of the French Revolution, and they were used as a way to try to explain the French Revolution. So you had the conservatives who were on the right, and they were concerned with preserving their traditional authority. And that would be the monarchists, the aristocracy, the noblemen, the church. They were concerned with preserving their authority. And that was something that applied to continental Europe, especially the Europe that spent a lot of time under Roman rule, because they had that authoritarianism. So when you talk about right wing in those countries, it is possible for conservatism to end up being a fascist, a Nazi type of movement. When you look at the English system, and I go on this as Liberty Inherited, England was very different. The conservatives there were concerned with conserving traditional English liberty. And they would support the king, or they would support the established church, as long as it stayed within the framework of the English Constitution as it evolved, through the Magna Carta and so forth. This is why the Tories, who are the conservatives, had no problem getting rid of James II, because he had basically stepped out of bounds of the English Constitution. So they're like, okay, you aren't going to get our support anymore. You're gone. And I think Burke explains that best, because what Burke was and what English conservatives are in that line of Burke was that they saw things as evolutionary. They didn't have any problems changing, but they wanted it to be done with respect to what came before, to what was the traditions and the establishment. They were very much afraid of abstract ideas that the the liberals that we would call liberals today, or the left has put forth, or that like in this French Revolution that the radicals put forth. Basically philosophies that had no connection with anything in the past. It was some abstract idea that some academics came up with, some philosophers came up with, and they decided they were going to uproot all of society with this type of to try these ideas out. And what Burke said, no, let's stay with true and tried philosophies and ideas, and what we'll do is adjust them over time. So the English system was very different than the French or the continental system, and that's why that graph that we always hear, the left-right, conservative, liberal model doesn't even work in English societies, in societies based on the English form of government.
No, I agree with you there, and in the essay you use that kind of model that I think actually Glenn Beck probably used quite a bit, which was the anarchy to tyranny, rather than left-right. But those are the different shades. Either a very authoritarian or a very anarchistic type government, and the Founding Fathers were trying to find something in between those, a lot of freedom, but not too much freedom.
Right, and if you look at a lot of the struggles in English history, they were struggles against government tyranny, or when the government got to, and I'm speaking of the government in the form of the king. The king is no different than really a president is. He's just the head of the government. And when he started to flex his muscles too much, then that was when you had the English come back at him, and the people push back. Oftentimes they were led by barons or noblemen, but they would push back in defense of their traditional liberties. What you see happen in continental Europe was really just a struggle between one group of people trying to take control of the government from another group of people. They just wanted to get the power for themselves. And that's different than what happened in English societies and English revolutions. The people were happy with lots of times keeping the king in place once they basically chastised him. And once they were able to pull him back and say, no, you aren't doing this, then they were happy to leave him in place. And there was lots of times where in English history, the English king, usually he was young, he just came to power, and he was going to throw his weight around and tell everybody, who he is and why they should listen to him. And by the end of his reign, he's nothing but a figurehead, because he's been beat up so much by the English people that he basically just gives up and kind of hides in his castle and lets Parliament and his ministers run everything.
Yeah, John, I noticed a little bit of Skype breakup. So if for any reason, and I think that may be the network here in the hotel, if it gets very quiet at my end, please keep on talking, because I will come back in. I've got my phone on standby just in case it happens. But just keep talking. I will be. If I do get dropped, then we'll go on. No, and really, that's I think the development of the kind of the constitutional monarchy that the Brits have, but. One thing in your essay, you talk about the fact that the Anglo-Saxon approach was very much more a commonwealth of free men. Just to challenge you a little bit, the environment, I would say, in those times, though, wasn't quite as Anglo-Saxon, if you like, as it had been in 1066 when when the Normans had invaded, because of course we do have the upper class, we do have the barons, we do have the lords that are sort of in between the king and the common people. So it wasn't quite totally a commonwealth of free men in a true Anglo-Saxon way. There was a little bit of that establishment in there, but perhaps not quite as extreme as the rest of Europe. Would you agree with that viewpoint?
Yes, there was the Norman invasion almost wiped out the Anglo-Saxon system of government. But it is real interesting that once after James I, or during James I, they brought back the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was basically a restatement of the traditional rights that the Anglo-Saxons had before the Norman conquest. So, but they were never able to get rid of that hierarchy or that structure that the Normans brought in with basically an aristocracy. That is one of the reasons that it was able to take off so well in the New World, in America, because when the colonists came over here, there was no aristocracy. And that's one of the big arguments why the United States did so well, because it did not have that layer of people holding down the common person.
Okay.
But then if you go over to the continent, there was no restraint like that. There was no restraint on the king. If we look at what's going on around the world today, the philosophies, whether it's been Nazism, communism, it's absolutism going back to Spain and France, the kings back then, and going against England and America in modern times, what it boils down to, what we see is a struggle to this day, between the Roman world and the Saxon world. And it's amazing how things still break down, all these centuries later, 16 centuries later.
Well, that's a good point to take a quick break. As you know, I've got my commercials to put in. And after the commercials, John, let's talk about how that applies to today. And, as you put it in the description of your essay, the Civil War and the GOP and things like that, there's a lot of parallels there. So, folks, stick with us. We're just going to have a quick break with some of these commercials. And just a reminder, if you're listening to the recording later, please, some of these offers may not still be valid. They're valid for 2, 3, 4 to 6 weeks. But if you listen later than that, then they may be gone. But anyway, here, stick with us, folks. We'll be right back.
Are you paying too much for your car insurance policy? Have you shopped your current plan in the last year? If you haven't, then you probably are paying too much. You could save up to 40% on your current car insurance coverage just by making a free call right now. Doesn't it make good sense to pay less for something you have to pay for anyway? And car insurance is one of those things. You got to have car insurance, whether you have 1 car or 10 cars. So why not see if you can pay a lot less for it right now? One quick 3-minute call, and you could save hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. We'll compare the leading car insurance companies and get you coverage that could save you up to 40% on your car insurance. Call now for a free quote. Call 800-603-9980. 800-603-9980. 800-603-9980. 800-603-9980. That's 800-603-9980.
Are you tired of commuting to a job that makes someone else rich, working harder than ever, but getting nowhere? Do you hate spending hundreds of dollars every week on daycare, having someone else raise your children? With our opportunities, you can start earning money as soon as next week. You get to be the boss, work from home, and live a happier life. At Be the Boss Network, you'll find hundreds of work-from-home opportunities that you can literally start today and be earning money as soon as next week. Go to freedom112.com and start earning money as soon as next week. You get to be the boss. Get out of the rat race. Work from home. Go to freedom112.com right now and change your life today. That's freedom112.com. Go to freedom112.com and start earning money as soon as next week. You be the boss. Go to freedom112.com. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment, credit qualification required, cancellation fee, auto pay, and paperless billing, and other restrictions apply. If you can't see the difference, why pay the difference? Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Only Dish brings you the best in entertainment for less than $20 a month. Cut the cable and don't get directed. Switch to Dish because at just $19.99, Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. It's so simple. The same channels cost less with Dish. So since you can't see the difference, don't pay the difference. Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Get premium movie channels free for 3 months, starting at just $19.99. Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. Call now to save with Dish. Dial 1-800-865-5017. That's 1-800-865-5017. The same channels for less than $20 a month. Dish. Call 1-800-865-5017 for details.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. And this is Stephen, your Patrick Come Lately, welcoming you back to the show. We're talking tonight to author John Hancock. You may recognize him from the book Liberty Inherited, where he explains in a very clear and understandable way how the Founding Fathers got their ideas that led to those great documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, probably some of the most remarkable and brilliant documents that we've seen in the world. How they could do the Constitution in, sort of 4 pages worth of type when we now have something like Obamacare that's sort of, 100,000 pages with all its extra regulations. Anyway, John Hancock is here, and we're talking about his essay, American Conservatism. And before the break, we talked about how there were sort of those that wanted to conserve power and those that wanted to conserve liberty. And I said after the break, John, we'd talk about that looking at today, because, of course, today you've got this something that obviously the mainstream media are exploiting, this kind of tension in the GOP between what I would call the big government Republicans and the liberty-loving Republicans.
Yeah, it's real interesting when I started to write that, or maybe I should share with you what inspired me to write it. My dad had given me a book long time ago, and I'd never really read it. It's a small book called Conservatism. It was written by a professor at Harvard by the name of Peter Bajeric, I think is how you pronounce his name, in 1956. So it was written back before a lot of the history and everything got corrupted. And I always had that book, and I never really read it, but for some reason it was sitting on my shelf of my bookcase, kind of pulled out, and I kept walking by it when I went to my closet, and finally I kept looking at it. So I'm going to pick it up and look through it. And I started reading, and a lot of this that I have in my essay is through his work. And once I started reading that, and he has the essays or the writing and the words of many of the people, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Edmund Burke, Maestre, and he starts explaining conservatism around the world. But he really makes one point clear, is that the conservatism in England was very different, and that is the conservatism that the Founding Fathers built this country on. I do think that over the years, conservatism itself has been corrupted. Definitely by the time of the progressive era of the early 1900s. And I think progressivism had kind of worked its way into both parties. And what you see is people vying, the Republican progressives and the Democrat progressives. What they're really doing is vying for the power of government in that maestre type of conservative way, where they aren't really interested in preserving liberty like Burke was. They're really trying to preserve the authority and the power of government that they've had accumulated over the years. And basically it's come down to a struggle between these two groups trying to maintain power. I really think like the Tea Party or the Liberty Group, I see kind of Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, and them are really the conservatives of the Burke style, where they aren't really concerned about retaining or having power. They're concerned about and fighting for preserving traditional American liberty. And when I read this book, it just kind of drew a line for me and made everything so clear. And once it made it clear, I wanted to turn around and share it with other people.
And again, I can recommend, because it's only a short essay. It's not that long, but it is great reading. It explains everything. And as I was reading it, and it was in the middle of that time, when Ted Cruz was trying to defund Obamacare, and you had people in the GOP sort of saying, well, Ted Cruz is all wrong. You could really see that schism between what I would call the establishment and let's say that they are the other kind of conservatives who want to retain power, as opposed to those that want to retain liberty. So it was interesting to read that and then look up and see what was going on in the GOP, and still is, of course. It'd be interesting to see how it develops. And a question that I'd like to put to you, John, as we when we come back after the break, because it's time for another break. But think on this one while we take the break. In a way, what you describe is that the GOP is really two very different groups of people kind of squished together. And with everything going on, I'll ask your thoughts after the break on what you think, whether or not there might be a break, a schism, and we might end up with a third party. Now, I know there's a lot of reasons why that should not happen, but we'll, like I said, we'll talk about that after the break. So again, stick with us, folks, and we'll have that interesting discussion. What could do we need a second party, or a third party, I should say, or not? Anyway, first of all, commercials, and then we'll have that discussion after the break.
Why spend more than you have to on your life insurance? Did you know that term life insurance rates have fallen over 60% in the last 15 years? At the Life Insurance Quote Line, we monitor the rates, features, and financial strength of hundreds of life insurance products. For example, a healthy 40-year-old can protect his family with $500,000 of 10-year level term for less than $20 a month. Rates for women are even lower. And don't forget to ask us about the new term life policies that guarantee your money back even if you don't die. Since 1986, we've helped tens of thousands of people just like you save a fortune on their life insurance. Why not find out how much you can save? Write down this number and call today for your free quote. 1 5-minute call is all it takes. Call 800-915-9734. 800-915-9734. That's 800-915-9734. Rates, policy forms, and availability vary by state.
My mom fell down last month. She didn't break her hip or anything this time, but it took her almost an hour to get to the phone to call me for help. I can't be there for her all the time, and I'm scared she won't be safe alone. She's so weak and frail. I don't know what to do or who to call for help.
We're LifeWatch, and we understand. We can be there for your mom or any loved one, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you call us right now, we'll send you absolutely free an information-packed report on the 9 most important things you need to know to make sure your parents are safe when living alone. It's completely free. Don't hesitate. Use our 35 years of senior medical alert expertise and put your mind at ease. Call us for your free report right now. 800-531-3815. That's 800-531-3815. Put your mind at ease. Call us at 800-531-3815. Call right now.
The path to restoring our republic was laid down by our founding fathers. The principles of freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, and limited government are conservative ideals we will never abandon. America is listening. Grassroots, common sense, conservative talk radio. It's on the internet. Tune in now. Red State Talk Radio, featuring some of the most popular internet talk show hosts in America today. Are you listening? RedStateTalkRadio.com.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, keeping the spirit of America alive, a proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network. And this is Stephen, your Patrick Come Lately. We're talking to author John Hancock about his essay about American Conservatism. And before the break, I said, John, we were going to talk about these different kind of conservatives that we see in the GOP. As you said, those that want to conserve power and those that want to conserve liberty. Are they going to kind of get so at odds with each other that we might end up with the third party?
Well, I do believe those who want to retain their power, they actually see the Tea Party or the liberty-oriented conservatives as a greater threat than they do the Democrats. Because the Democrats understand the game. You know, it's been played now for several decades, and the establishment, if you want to call it, or the power conservatives are willing to work with them to retain their power. They'll work whoever they can to retain their power. So it depends on what happens, I believe, in the next election, and how many Mike Lee or Ted Cruz's get sent to the Senate, get sent to the Congress. Then is there a chance of just overturning the party? Basically, the establishment or the power people seeing the writing on the wall, so to speak, and just kind of fading away or not trying to stop the inevitable. But I believe if we don't get that representation, if we don't show that the American people are behind us, then they're going to continue to resist and put up a struggle, and they're going to continue to block liberty-oriented people, conservatives, to get into the party, to get into Congress at various levels. I mean, not even just nationally, but I think locally we see it being done too. I was out here in California even. We had to really fight to get a Tea Party caucus at the local Republican Party convention, and we finally did. But we have to push and really try to fight to get into the local committees, county committees. So if we can do that, then I think the party can be saved and be turned over. But if not, if we don't show that we have the support of the American people, then I believe that the other side will become more entrenched, and I think you will see them working more closely with Democrats in order to retain their power.
Yeah, and I saw a good description of a establishment type GOP person, or the time we like to call them rhinos, and basically that was that in principle they agree with the Regressives' big government plans. It's just that they think that they can do it better than the other side.
Exactly, and that goes back to what I said. All it turns out to be is a struggle of who controls the levers of power in Washington, D.C., or the state capitals. And then what they do is, depending on whether it's Democrat progressive or Republican progressive, they each push their own agendas. But the whole thing is, at the same time, or what both of them are doing, is eroding traditional American liberties. And in order to retain their power or increase their power. So, it's basically depends on if. Well, let me put it this way: this didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen with Obama. It didn't happen with just the Democrats gaining the House and the Senate in 2008. This has been going on, like I mentioned before, for decades. I was unaware of it. Most Americans were unaware of it. And this is what I explain to my liberal friends that I have, that I come across, and when I hear them say things about the Tea Party, I say, look, Tea Party are Republicans who woke up and realized that the Republicans are aspects to the Republican Party that is as bad as you guys were saying it was. We woke up, and now we're saying, wait a minute, we have to reform the Republican Party. You guys still haven't woken up yet. I think Obamacare is waking them up slowly, but you guys are still asleep thinking your party's not doing anything wrong. And I said, I'll be the first one to admit my party lost its way a long time ago. And I said, it's the Tea Party that's trying to set it right, or people like the Tea Party that's trying to set it right again.
Yeah, and there's also a discussion, of course, if you look at the traditional Democrats of the Democrat Party, and then the regressives or the progressives of today, and I've said this on the show before. I saw that happen in the UK, where what we call the left wing, but I agree with your essay as it isn't left and right, but anyway, but those more extreme, take over the party, and I think today's Democrat Party is indeed very strongly progressive, but it's not the traditional Democrats of yore by any means.
No, and again, you only go back a few decades to Kennedy, and you can see that. I think Kennedy, there was a big shift in the late 60s, early 70s on everything, and whether it's history or politics, anything that came after basically 1968, you kind of have to look at with some sort of suspicion, because that's when I think, I'll call it what it is, or what I believe it is the Marxism started creeping in. And once the Marxism started creeping in, it started to corrupt everything. It corrupted academia, it's corrupted science, it's corrupted religion in so many ways. So you have to be very careful when in anything that came after the 70s, and realize that there is establishment, that people have worked their way into the establishment, and they're working kind of behind the scenes, and they will put the front and talk about, they will pay lip service to American freedoms and so forth. The other side does it all the time. They're about having freedom for all Americans, not just the white males, as they put it. They were willing to do that, but in the end, both parties have sat there and have eroded American liberty to the point where we don't even know what it is anymore. I talk to the younger generation, and I was talking to a group of high schoolers, probably about 60 of them, and I asked them, okay, if you were sitting someplace in a public area and you were going to say something politically incorrect, I said, how many of you look around to see who's near you before you say it? Almost all of them raised their hands. And I said, do you realize when I was in high school, we used to say that only happened in Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union? When I was in high school, one thing about being American, you could always say what you thought.
Yeah.
Now you guys are looking around just like you're in Nazi Germany, for the Gestapo or the KGB.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're coming up to the next break. I just want to leave one controversial thought. You were talking about this sort of increase of Marxism, basically into the progressives and into the Democrat Party. So I think it might be appropriate at this point to say, come back, Joe McCarthy, all is forgiven.
Right.
Okay, well, we're going to take the final break, John. After the break, I want to chat. There's a couple of topics, see if we can squeeze them in the last few minutes. Talk about Burke conservatism, or Burkean conservatism and change. So it isn't as if conservatism always stays the same, it can change. And then also how to recognize what I'm calling Burkean conservatives. So, like I said, just hang on for these commercials, and then, folks, we will be right back after these messages when they play. Come on. Here they go.
I will never forget the day my son Jeremy told me he hated me and slammed the door in my face. I'm behavioral therapist Janet Lehman. Behavior problems can turn the child you love and your life into a nightmare. That's why my husband James and I created the Total Transformation, the step-by-step program that shows you how to fix the worst behavior problems and get your child to respect and listen to you again. No matter what the behavior, defiance, backtalk, angry outbursts, disrespect, we can help you stop it. Now you can get the Total Transformation for free. All you need to do is get the program and let us know how it works for you. You can keep it forever for free.
Limited number of free programs available. Call now. 1-800-259-1409. 1-800-259-1409. 1-800-259-1409. That's 1-800-259-1409.
Are you at least 62 years old like me? Could you use an extra $50,000, $100,000 or more to live a better life? Then please consider the benefits a reverse mortgage can provide to you. With a reverse mortgage, you can have your mortgage payments stopped altogether and get equity out of your home to live on. And you can use the money to help you live a better life. How nice would that be, not to have a mortgage payment? Qualifying for a reverse mortgage is simple, since there are no income, asset, employment, or credit requirements. However, you must be 62 years or older, own your home outright, or have a very low balance on the mortgage, and be prepared to live in it throughout the rest of the loan. Call now for more information.
800-704-1662. 800-704-1662. 800-704-1662. That's 800-704-1662.
150 million people suffer from headaches. All you want is for the pounding in your head to stop. Migralex stops the pounding. Migralex was developed by a neurologist and founder of the New York Headache Center.
I'm neurologist Dr. Alex Mauskop. After studying and researching the human brain for 25 years, I've developed Migralex, which eliminates pounding headaches. It works for my patients, and I'm so convinced it will work for you. I don't just guarantee it, I put my name on it.
Dr. Mauskop's Migralex gets rid of headaches fast without harsh caffeine, sodium, or preservatives.
Migralex works unbelievably fast, and it's gentle on my stomach.
Find out how to get your free bottle of Migralex. Call 800-559-3307. Plus, if you're one of the first 100 callers, you'll also receive the Migralex Quick Tips to Headache Relief absolutely free. That's 800-559-3307. Or go to migralexrelief.com. MIGRALEX relief.com. Or call 800-559-3307.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. Okay, that's our last break over. John, before the break I said let's quickly talk in the remaining few minutes about, first of all, Burkean conservatism and change. So Burkean conservatism wants to conserve liberty, but it is open to change, and your essay describes that quite well. Can you just give us a quick summary of that?
Yeah, Burke understood that the world could not stand still, that it was evolving and changing. His ideas, and again, it wasn't just his, he was just the best speaker, the best proponent of these ideas, the mouthpiece, you should, maybe best to say. But his was that the reason things are now, the ideas that we have and the way we do things, is because they've been time tested, and that the best has kind of risen to the top. They're the true, tried, best practices. So his idea was, or his philosophy is, we don't resist change. We see that things have to be changed. For example, women, needed or deserved the right to vote. That needed to change. Slavery had to end. There were things that society constantly has to do to change, but you base it on proven and tried ideas, philosophies, principles. And this is why he resisted the French Revolution so much, because he saw the French Revolution as basically just embracing these untried abstract ideas. And he was the first one. He was the Ted Cruz of his time, because everybody was embracing the French Revolution. The English thought it was their 1688. The Americans thought it was their 1776. He was the only one that stood up and said, nope, this is going to end horribly, because he saw, unlike 1688 for the English and 1776 for the Americans, he saw that it was not based on anything other than these abstract ideas, and these abstract ideals would fail, and then it would be a bloodletting. And that's exactly what happened. The abstract ideas didn't work. They were basically theories. Theories don't hold up well when they run against human nature. It collapsed, and you ended up with the Reign of Terror, and then finally Napoleon. And this is what happens to all these revolutions that occur around the world, whether it's the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, or the Arab Spring. They all end up the same way, because they're based on these abstract ideas that aren't grounded in anything solid.
Right.
So, but he recognized that we had, things have to evolve and change, but they have to. You kind of have to filter them through the past and see what's been tried and whether they will work or not.
Okay, in about a minute and a half, John, how do you recognize a Burkean conservative?
Basically, we have our liberties spelled out in the Bill of Rights, so it makes it fairly easy for us. If someone is actually standing up for them, and I don't mean just paying lip service, but is willing to risk his own election seat, his own position in office to preserve these liberties, he's a Burkean. If someone says that he's for all this stuff, but when it comes down to it, he's not willing to jeopardize his position of power, then he is not a Burkean conservative. Burke went against his contemporaries a lot, and like I said, at the French Revolution, he was basically considered a crazy person. He was an extremist, but time proved him right.
Yep.
So it's basically you go by their deeds, by the fruits of their labor, not by what they say.
Yeah, and so and I think good examples today are, and you've mentioned the names a number of times, are really people like Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, are ones who are really, ready to stand up and pay the price if necessary, right?
Well, yeah, and we saw this. We see Burke that he was basically sent to the wilderness when he outspoke and said something that the establishment didn't like. Churchill, with the rise of Nazism and the threat of Germany, he was sent to the wilderness and was basically considered a washout. And this happens all through history, but yet history somehow ends up proving these people right, that they were the ones. And I think the Lees and the Cruzes are going to be the ones that are going to be shown they're the right ones. And the other side, the Robes and McCains and those Grahams are going to be forgotten by history.
Okay. Well, John, we've come to the end of the show. Time flies when you're having fun. So I just want to remind folks they can go to your website, johnhancock.com.
John L. Hancock.
johnlhancock.com. Pick up a copy of the essay. You can get a PDF form. You can read it on your computer. Thanks for coming on today. I think it's 3 or 4 weeks. Look for the invitation, folks. John will be coming back to talk about the Glorious Revolution and William of Orange, which is a little bit more out of the book Liberty Inherited. So thanks a lot, John, and talk to you in a few weeks.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And just to let you know, folks, so a few weeks, John will be coming back. I'm hoping either next week or the week after to get Wild Bill. I played that clip of his about the T-teams last week. He said he will come on the show, so I just need to find out which one we can get him on. And otherwise, I see it's time to say TTFN, ta-ta for now. And thanks for listening in, folks. Do join us again next week. Thank you for listening to the show. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's topics. Whether you listened live, to a recording, or to a rebroadcast, I appreciate the time you share with me. We need to spread the message of liberty far and wide, so please tell your friends and family about the show. Thank you for helping to keep the beacon of hope burning. This is Stephen, your Patrick Come Lately, signing off. God bless America, and remember, L3, long live liberty.